Hello and welcome to Note Doctors. My name is Paul.
My name is Jenn.
My name is Ben.
And we are your hosts. We are all university music theory instructors who are passionate about music theory and music theory instruction. In this podcast, we will be talking about all things theory with some of the best music theory teachers in the country. If you want to know more about music theory and the most effective and innovative ways to teach it, this is the podcast for you. Hello and welcome back to Note Doctors, the music theory and pedagogy podcast. So we are really excited for this episode because this episode came about because a good friend of the show, Rebecca Jemian, who is up at the University of Louisville, she emailed us and said, I just met Stephanie Venturino at the AP Music Theory reading grading session, and you need to have her on the podcast. What she's doing is awesome, and you must have her on. And, you know, when Rebecca Jemian tells you to do something, you do it. And so we reached out to Stephanie, and we are really excited to share this conversation as she talks about her really cool work in creating videos for the AP theory curriculum and kind of the advice that she gives for people who are interested in doing that type of technology within their own context. But before we get into the conversation, let's learn a little bit more about Dr. Venturino.
Sure. Stephanie Venturino is an assistant professor of analysis and musicianship at the Yale School of Music, where she teaches graduate level performers, composers, and conductors. She holds a PhD in music theory and a BM in saxophone performance from the Eastman School of Music, as well as an advanced certificate in online teaching from the University of Rochester's Warner School of Education. Her research focuses on 20th and 21st century French music, history of music theory, and music theory and oral skills pedagogy. She is particularly interested in collaborative, interdisciplinary teaching, digitally rich learning, and online/hybrid teaching in K-12 and university contexts.
And I think that's the spirit of, hopefully of all music theory teachers and oral skills teachers, is always thinking about how can I evolve, how can I continue to meet the needs of my students. And, it goes to the heart of what a heart of good pedagogy is really having student-centered, a student-centered outlook. And so thinking about how that has different, ramifications, whether it's in your face-to-face classroom and how you interact with students on a personal basis, the types of activities you do, or whether it's in changing the mode of instruction and going more online. So I think it all comes back to that core, and if we can kind of think about how we can sort of, serve our students, then I think we'll be set no matter what sort of the world throws at us.
Stephanie, we are so happy to have you on the podcast to talk to us about all the really cool things you're doing with AP Music Theory and creating video and digital resources for educators within your own area, but for educators all across. And so before though we get into kind of what you've been up to, we always like to ask our guests a little bit about how they got into music theory. Was it an early fascination with tweed jackets? But what kind of got you into that world and to get to where you are now?
Sure. Well, thanks, first of all, for having me on the podcast. I've been a longtime admirer, so it's pretty awesome to be here talking to all of you and to just share what's going on in the world of music theory pedagogy. So probably like most music theorists, you're not coming home from school at 4 years old and saying, hey, Mom and Dad, I want to become a music theorist. I've discovered this great passion. Forget the firefighter, forget the astronaut. I want to become a music theorist. So for me, though, I actually did have a moment that was very pivotal in my early years, which was I heard a saxophone when I was 4 years old, and I thought, now that's what I want to become. So that sort of started my musical journey. It was my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary. I heard this tenor saxophonist playing with a Music -1 CD, and I thought, that is the coolest thing ever. So so my parents said, hey, okay, this tenor saxophone is, larger than you are at this point. You're 4 years old, but if you play piano for 5 years, we will buy you a saxophone. So I said, okay, great. And I hated piano. But piano was great because not only did it get me, reading fluently and treble and bass clefs, but it also got me started on my music theory journey. So my piano teacher would, at the beginning of each lesson, have me do some exercises from Grace. I think it's Grace Vandenduel, her keyboard theory textbooks. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those, but I hated it. I hated music theory. All I was doing was these chord inversions, and I thought, what is this? How is this going to help me play the piano better? So that was my first interaction with music theory. Fast forward a couple years, I'm still going with the saxophone. I finally got it, and I'm kind of reaching to the point where I need some more deliberate music education. I was homeschooled, so I needed to go outside of sort of the public school sphere. So I ended up enrolling at the Eastman Community Music School. I'm from the Rochester area, so that resource was available to me. And there was a music theory course, and I thought, if I'm going to go into music, which I knew I wanted to do at that time, I should probably, bite the bullet and take this music theory thing that I know is not very fun, but I should do. And it was species counterpoint, and I fell in love. I said, this is the same music theory that I was, dreading doing before each piano lesson. So really just the creativity, I loved all of the rules. I loved sort of following a system, and then really discovering what makes a composition special. How can I really dive into what sort of composers, the structures that they're presenting, and the different ways we can think about music. So that kind of started my music theory journey. I ended up enrolling at Eastman for an undergraduate in saxophone and music theory, and then went directly into their PhD program after that. So that's how I got started. So piano, thank you very much.
So that makes me feel better about having Lucas, my son, in piano lessons.
Yes.
It makes me feel better.
Yeah, there were some times I was, crying at the piano, but my mom, she made me push through, and she said, have this large goal in mind of wanting the saxophone, and I'm so grateful, sitting here many years later and playing piano every day in the classroom, that I had her persistence and pushing me on. So, absolutely.
Well, and for a little kid, 5 years is a long time. Like, at that point, that was longer than you had been alive total.
Absolutely.
So it is amazing that you held on to that dream that whole time. That's really phenomenal. In some ways, that's its own kind of lesson that your parents gave you of persistence.
Sure, and I held them accountable. When that birthday was coming up, I said, I'd better be getting the saxophone. So
I love that.
Yep, exactly.
I just love thinking I got that. You have a Selmer catalog or something that you're circling as like a 7-year-old. I really want that.
Sure.
It's not like a Barbie dollhouse or
no other saxophone could do. It had to be the tenor. So I actually started on tenor sax, which is kind of unusual, but I had that very strong vision in my mind from that 4-year-old encounter. So.
I love that so much.
Yeah.
Well, and I had a similar experience with theory and piano lessons too. I mean, I hated it. It was just a workbook, and it was chords and inversions and key signatures, and I'm like, what is this? It was so divorced from the music that I was playing, and there was no connection at all.
Sure.
And so, it wasn't until later on in college I'm like, oh, well, this is music theory. This is something I find interesting, not what I was doing in piano lessons.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the turning point for me was at the community music school, where I had that species counterpoint class. I was also able to take an independent study where I analyzed a piece of my own, a saxophone, 20th century saxophone piece, and it really opened my eyes to, wow, I could actually have some sort of connection between theory and performance. And so I think that sparked that interest, which has been an enduring sort of pedagogical goal of mine, since then, to try for my students to connect how theory, and performance could possibly interact with each other and be sort of mutually beneficial. So.
Yeah, totally. So, as a graduate student at Eastman, you helped develop an online pre-college theory class. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you got started in that, and maybe a little bit also about the program itself?
Sure, absolutely. So I enrolled in Eastman as an undergraduate, and I actually had been interning there as a music theory instructor since 2010. So I started in high school interning there, teaching music theory in the classroom, and then went on through undergrad and through my graduate school. And I had been really inspired in 2015, actually. That's when I first started doing online teaching. And I was very much concerned because I was teaching these pre-college students, and I only had 1 hour a week with them. And that was hardly, there was not enough time to go through the details of chromatic harmony and form. And so I was really struggling, and at that time was introduced to the flipped classroom model in 2015. And I thought, wow, online instruction is the way to really maximize my time in the classroom, having students, view instructional videos before coming to class, or do online, assignments and quizzes and things. So I had been doing this since 2015. And then pre-pandemic, this was about 2018, I thought to myself, well, if I'm going to be including online components within my classes. I should probably get some training in this. So I ended up going to the University of Rochester's Warner School of Education. They have a very strong online teaching and learning program. So I enrolled in their advanced certificate in online teaching and learning there and really got some strong instruction. At the same time, I had been in contact with the Institute for Music Leadership at Eastman, who had sort of had some of these online music theory courses. I'm not sure if you have heard of Steve Late's E-Theory Fundamentals course that's been available for many years, but there was a live version of that course that had sort of mixed success. It wasn't a very large enrollment, and they were looking to do something new with that particular E-Theory live course. So I kind of came in and said, I'm very interested in the online sphere. You have this course. Why don't we re-envision this as an AP music theory course? There's going to be a much larger sort of clientele and potential base for this course. Students have very strong extrinsic motivation to take the AP music theory exam to prepare for it. And so that's kind of where this course was born, with sort of this mutual sort of desire on my part to increase sort of the online offerings at Eastman, but also my, this course that needed to really, I think, be revised and rethought. So that's how it got started. And thankfully, this was, around the same time as the pandemic. So I think the course was really boosted by, we really got the ground, everything running in the academic year before the pandemic. So it had been going, it was kind of like the timing was perfect, but not intended. So we were able to get a grant to help with startup costs and to get the course running. So our initial enrollment was about a little over 30 students from all across the United States, and also international students. So we've had students from as far as Thailand, Austria, all different coasts. A lot of students from the West Coast, a lot of students from the East Coast, all over Canada. So we've been able to really draw a lot of students from all across the globe in this particular course. So right now it's still going strong. I'm only involved sort of as in a supervisory role right now because I've sort of transitioned from Eastman at this point. But the course really combines asynchronous and synchronous elements. So there's asynchronous activities such as reading. We use the Clendenning Marvin textbook and the digital version of that textbook. So they're reading portions of the textbook. They're doing the note flight workbook assignments. They're watching my instructional videos, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in a little bit. They are doing contextual listening exercises that I devise and that are housed within the Blackboard system. But there's also, which I think is really important, a synchronous component. So we get all of the students together in these various sort of Zoom sessions throughout the week. And that really builds a sense of community. And during those sessions, we're doing a lot of practice exercises together. We're singing, we're doing sight singing, we're analyzing music together, we're going through test, prep materials. So it's not just sort of log on, do your work, get some feedback a week or two later and log off. There's a component of it, independent work, but also of let's build a community, a learning community together, which I think is something really important within the online space. So that's kind of how the course is structured and how it came to be. I was just so grateful that we were able to collaborate with the Institute for Music Leadership and bring this course to life. And it's really been a great learning experience for me, and I think for the students, many of whom don't have access to quality music theory education throughout wherever they are, in the world, or perhaps in more rural areas or in different sort of educational spheres where they don't have, an AP music theory class in their school or in their community. So.
Yeah, that's really great. I didn't have AP theory as an option when I was in high school. And, I wish I had. I don't know, because of the structure of my department, it might have saved me a class or something when I got to college, but it might have made me understand everything in Theory 1 better, even if I had sat through all of it. I think Absolutely. I would have still found it really, really helpful when I got to college. So I have also done the AP reading.
Wonderful.
And I think, I'm amazed. Every question I've graded, I'm amazed at what the students can do, what they know and what they can show you. I'm curious what you think are the strengths, the weaknesses of the AP program in general.
Absolutely. Well, just even before I get into sort of the curriculum, I think just the digital resources that the College Board is distributing these days are extreme. I've just been so impressed, having taught AP music theory for the past over 10 years now. AP Classroom is really an invaluable resource, and just the amount of, instructional videos that are up there by really seasoned AP teachers, the personal progress checks, the online test bank. It's been an invaluable resource. I just wanted to give a shout out to the College Board for sort of bringing that resource to life. I think that,
Can you say
AP
that one more time? I'm so sorry. I was actually trying to write that down. AP
Classroom. Yeah, it's a resource that once you are, part of an approved AP course, you're an AP teacher that you're able to use for your students. And my students have really benefited from that. And it's nice to have all of the practice resources in one location versus, kind of having, I think they used to have like CDs and, cassette tapes. And I remember my teacher, sort of bringing them out. And so it's nice to have everything digitized in a secure sort of location. So absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
for saying
highly
that again.
recommend.
Sorry to interrupt. Didn't
Oh,
mean to
no,
interrupt
not
you,
at all.
But I definitely wanted to check that out. Okay.
Yeah. So I think, the AP music theory curriculum, it's a big challenge because oftentimes you're getting students, there's no prerequisite for the course, and you're getting them, maybe they are able to read music notation in one clef. Maybe they're a singer and they can read treble clef, or, they can read bass clef, and they can play an instrument, and that's basically all you're starting with. So I really appreciate how, sort of how much we're covering, like you were saying, Jen, like how far you're getting from that very beginning stages to by the end of the course, how much they can do. I really appreciated in 2019 there was a revision of the course, and so the new course exam description, the course description and exam description came out, and I appreciated the streamlining I think that was done with that particular revision in 2019. So taking out things like modulation, sort of stopping at applied chords, taking out some of these. So taking out binary form, I think, was one of the things they took out. Also taking out some sort of form labels like fugue, or things that just weren't really used in the test but were sort of overhead for students. So I've really appreciated how much they've been updating the course and kind of trying to pack in as much as possible, but making it possible for students to get through it when they start at such a beginning stage. Another thing I really enjoy about the course is the amount of emphasis on oral skills, and so also the amount of emphasis on oral analysis. I really appreciate in the different styles, hearing different elements, whether it's instrumentation, what instrumentation is happening in this particular excerpt, or what Roman numeral did we end on here? How could you put that? How could you provide a Roman numeral label for this chord we just ended on, for example? So I think that's something that's extremely helpful and very applicable for students to think critically about the music that they're listening to, whether it's Taylor Swift or whether it's Beethoven. So I really like that emphasis for sure. As far as weaknesses, I think if you look at the AP Music Theory curriculum, it's very much focused on, to me, sort of three categories and then an extraneous category, which is fundamentals, harmony, voice leading, and then Unit 8, the very end, if you look at the description, is modes and form. I'm like, wow, okay. So I feel like that, just kind of taking a look and thinking critically about that is, I wonder if we should maybe be spending some more time on form, some more time on modes, and maybe some more time on, rhythm and meter, for example, or spending more time on timbre, or spending more time on non-classical music, for example. So really thinking about how can this be less of an exam that's, you could maybe alternatively title it like AP European art music, and how could it maybe be a more holistic sort of approach to music? And it's something I think we need to consider is, what do our students need? And that's really the heart of, I think every sort of pedagogical stance should be, how can we make the most student-centered, student-focused, sort of product? And I think that we need to continue as our field continues to evolve, and we're just, moving forward, and our students' needs change, the music they listen to is changing, that we need to take a step back and think, okay, how is that going to be reflected perhaps in, the AP music theory exam? And what are generally the skills that students need to know versus maybe focusing on how can I, put in so much art music, how can I be so repertoire focused? Like, what are the core skills, and then how can I diversify the repertoire from there? So I think that's something that needs to be looked at. But there's so many issues here. There's needing textbooks that perhaps are more decentered. There's thinking about sort of the vicious cycle of what happens in AP influences undergrad courses, and then vice versa. And so there's this sort of cycle you need to think about there. And then thinking about the position, I was at SMT in 2019. I think it was the session on corralling the chorale, and that was, I think, published in Journal of Music Theory Pedagogy, and a couple years later. And that was a very, I think, thought-provoking session and piece of writing is thinking about what is the position of the chorale within, not just, art teaching of art music, but also within the AP Music Theory exam. I mean, it's extremely heavily focused on chorale type, production, whether that's, figured bass, whether that's, the harmonic dictation. So what sort of positioning is the chorale going to have, in the AP Music Theory exam and in general in our curriculums moving forward, I think is something to really think about. So these are sort of, I think, weaknesses and maybe questions as we move forward into the 21st century that we need to keep evolving, keep thinking about how can we make this more student-focused, student-centered, and really diversify what we think about as music theory.
Yeah, totally. There was a really interesting article a couple of years ago. Stacey Davis and Jennifer Beavers, and forgive me if there was another author and I'm forgetting who it was, but I think that it was the two of them. They wrote this article about how the AP curriculum corresponds to what's actually going on in university classrooms, and how many universities are accepting AP theory for credit automatically, how many have other barriers to that. And I thought it was really interesting that like theory 1 at most universities is pretty aligned. Theory 2 is sort of like a stretch. Like if you look at theory 2 and 3 as a like little group together, then it's going to be fairly universal. But if some schools are doing things in theory 2 that others are doing in theory 3 and vice versa. And so, yeah, I was just asking all these interesting questions about, like, if it's supposed to count for the entire freshman year of music theory and aural skills, how many schools are actually doing that in practice? I think the answer is really very few.
Sure.
And I know here we will accept AP credit for theory 1, and I usually do a little evaluation for aural skills to see, like, is that the best choice? Mm-hmm. Just because aural skills is, we all use our own particular ways, our own particular, and you don't want to throw a kid in the deep end in aural skills too, and they're like, what is going on? When they could have just taken a 1 credit class, that would have made sure that they're ready, even if a lot of it was review.
Sure, yeah, and a lot of times the aural skills lag behind anyway, so it's better to have, I think, sort of, not redundancy, but more practice, more sort of face time with that. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's something, we, when I was at the reading this year, we were talking about, what are those, what's sort of the tipping point? Like when, do we look at, okay, there's a lot of sort of, there's a deficit or a deficiency between like, okay, what we thought was happening in undergraduate sort of, theory 1, theory 2, and then what we're doing with the AP, like when does that divide, get wide enough for us to say, okay, we really need to fundamentally rethink what the AP music theory exam is and what, how it sort of leads into the undergraduate curriculum.
Right.
So I'll be interested over the next couple of years to see how these discussions sort of progress.
Yeah, me too.
But those conversations are definitely happening, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was interesting that you mentioned that, Jen, because, a lot of us this time of the year just happen to be giving, whether it's a placement exam, we don't have a placement exam, which I like, but we do have a credit by exam where they can test out, And it was interesting listening to your answer, Stephanie, about the strengths and weaknesses. And you mentioned aural skills, the amount of activities that are available is a strength. I don't want to say that's wrong. I think I agree. But I would say in terms of the trends over the last 5 years, what I've seen, and I don't know what other schools have seen. I can only comment on my little slice of, the United States. Overall, the theory scores have actually trended upward. Like this year, for the first time, the majority of people passed Theory 1 credit by exam, and I awarded people credit, and I was thinking, wow, this is so great. The instruction coming out of pre-college must be so good in music theory. And then I graded the aural skills portion. And it wasn't the same. In fact, it was kind of trending the other direction, I'll just say, and
for sure.
Oh, and I just wondered, is this just this particular group, or is this an overall trend? I mean, I've definitely had written theory pre-college teachers come up and say, oh my gosh, I'm so proud that my students know augmented sixth types. Yeah. And I thought to myself, augmented six types. Do you realize how small of a slice of, music theory that is?
Yeah.
Sure.
And then you ask them to count something in 6/8, and they're like,
Absolutely.
how many beats per bar in 6/8? A question like that, right?
Yeah.
And they're like
clueless.
six.
I have no idea. And I'm like, wait a minute, but types of augmented six chords? Is that really
Sure.
something to be especially proud of? I just thought that's so weird.
No, absolutely. I totally agree with you. And let me qualify my statement. I appreciated the oral analysis, that there is some oral analysis, but I also find huge sort of huge deficiencies in focusing so much on, for example, time dictation, focusing so much on only sight singing. There's so many more oral skills that are just as important. So, sitting a kid down and saying, okay, you have 4 times or 3 times to hear this 4-bar melody. Is that really the best way that we can assess sort of the oral competency, or to, practicing that over and over again as far as test prep? Is that the best way to open their ears, to work on their sort of, rhythmic memory, to work on their pitch memory? So I think there's so many more ways that we can assess sort of oral skills, but and I agree with you that the deficiencies there are really strong. And I think it's hard to teach oral skills. Oral skills is extremely challenging to teach, especially at the pre-college level. There's a lot of, I feel like there's a lot of support for, there's theory textbooks. You can look at the textbook, I can understand a concept, and there's sort of okay, here's the answer. We didn't have any parallel fifths, correct, no parallel fifths or octaves, I can grade that easily. But oral skills, it's so hard to teach. You have to be, not only as a teacher, sort of able to do the content, perform the content yourselves, but be also simultaneously assessing what someone's doing, responding, giving them real-time feedback. It's so challenging. So I think oftentimes oral skills instruction is a lot more, maybe de-emphasized, or not as thoroughly sort of pushed within the pre-college sphere, I think, because it's really, really challenging. And I'm glad that the AP includes these oral activities, but I think oftentimes in AP music theory classrooms that I've sort of visited and been a part of, it's oftentimes de-emphasized, unfortunately, and they'll gravitate, as you're saying, Ben, more to the theory side and less to the oral side. And a lot of students will kind of be like, tell me sort of anecdotal comments like, oh, I've got to get such a high score, sub score on the written part so I can make up for where I just don't do well in the dictations. And it's like, that's a sad thing, so I think they're feeling that too, that they don't have sort of the same skill set in both theory and oral skills.
Yeah, totally. I don't have an answer. I'm not trying to, I hope somebody out there doesn't think, oh my gosh, Graf's just complaining and, it's not offering solutions, or I'm just looking at the scores and it happened to be this time of the year. We didn't even plan this, but it's just a confluence of events. And I thought that's interesting to hear, all the resources that are available. I personally wonder what is actually going on, in that 50-minute class period or that hour and 20 class period. I would tend to think that it sounds to me like maybe the teachers are less comfortable doing the oral skills for exactly the reasons that you mentioned. But, I don't want to just be up here pontificating from the academy. You know what I mean?
No, sure.
You get in the classroom, Ben, and see if you can do that.
Exactly. So but yeah, I had to mention that because I did definitely notice that as an overall trend.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, and I completely concur. I see the same trends with my grad students, with my undergrads, with my pre-college. I think whatever sort of sphere you're looking at, that's usually the case. So, yeah, the question is how do we remedy that? How do we provide more support to teachers? How do we provide more timely instruction for our students? And it's really challenging. I'm every day really challenged by teaching oral skills, and it's so exciting to have that as sort of a lifelong mission.
It is.
Yeah.
So your instructional videos that we were able to watch before we had you on are just awesome, I have to say. Your ability just to talk off the cuff. Maybe you rehearse a lot, but just having a conversation with you today, you are just very clear in your instruction, the way you speak. And so they're just really well done.
Thank you.
And the way you're able to integrate the video, you're using iPad and things like that. And for so many of us, we've had to learn technology, how to make videos, how to do stuff through Zoom, with the pandemic and all those things. Can you talk us through a little bit, just, it can be like nuts and bolts, like what programs you use, because
I'd love to.
We're always trying to find new ways. And we have listeners who are oftentimes, they started teaching theory, in the 90s or the 2000s, and now they're expected to use Zoom and iPads and screen share and all these things. It can be very overwhelming when you think about the fact that just teaching oral skills face-to-face is hard. Now you have to do it with technology.
Sure.
Can you talk to us a little bit about the technology that you use and kind of how you go about creating these types of educational videos?
Absolutely. So the first thing, when I was making this AP Music Theory course, I was faced with the challenge of how am I going to make 70 instructional videos in the span of 3 months, and that was a kind of a daunting task. And you're going with you have to think about, okay, these are students who have maybe all they know how to do is play their trombone. They're a beginning trombone student or what, and have that in mind. How am I going to be comprehensive yet friendly, concise, clear? Whatever. So I was really thinking about how can I make this, as easy on myself as possible. And really what I came down to was thinking about how can I limit the amount of post-production that I do. I was imagining myself, with these 70 videos sitting there doing hours of editing and having to do a million retakes and splice things together. And that's not what I do with my setup. So kind of sort of nuts and bolts of it is that I try to keep things very short. So I really have no videos that are over 10 minutes. And I really strive for around 5 minutes as sort of like a max. And then I don't stop recording unless something terrible happens. Your cat jumps on your lap or something, hey, maybe even that's a keeper too. But so try to keep it going. So for example, if I'm talking about cadences and I want to talk about half cadences, I want to talk about IAC, PAC, Phrygian half cadence, it's like, okay, I'm not talking about all these cadences. I'm going to pick one. And I'm going to start out by thinking about, okay, how can I sort of hook the student? How can I have some sort of musical example or something to really get them engaged in what the topic I'm talking about starting at the beginning? So think about how can I make this musical? And then how can I give them some sort of bite-sized information? Like what are 3 top things that they need to know about the half cadence? Or what are 3 top things they need to know about XYZ topic? So keeping that in mind is sort of a general strategy. And then what I do is so as far as equipment, I have a mirrorless camera set up, I have a electronic keyboard, I have an audio interface, and then sort of as far as software, I'm using OBS Studio, which is a streaming and a streamer software often used by video game streamers, like you'll see quite a bit also for live streaming. So it's a completely free software, anyone can go use it. And what it allows for is so you can have sort of this studio setup and you can sort of manipulate it in whatever way you want. So all of my videos are structured like a combination screencast is sort of the name I've given it, which is you see me in the shot, you'll see my iPad being mirrored to my computer. You don't see the computer screen, you just see the iPad screen. But that's how I'm capturing it. And then you'll also see the piano keyboard. And so having all of these different sort of inputs are very easy to sort of set up through OBS Studio, and you can record, just click a button and it'll record all of these different streams simultaneously. So I'm annotating with the iPad, I'm talking to the students, I'm playing things on the piano and going in between, just like I would in a classroom, all of these different sort of mediums. And then what I can also do within this software is I can switch between what are called different scenes. So if I want to have a close-up of, if I want to go into just the screen share, I can do that. If I want the focus just on me as sort of like a talking head video, I can do that. And if I want to focus in on the piano, I could do that as well. So I can seamlessly, by sort of pressing a hotkey on my computer keyboard, switch in between these different scenes. So I'm able to do this without sort of adding in transitions, in post-production or sort of splicing together different videos. So that's how I'm able to sort of in a nuts and bolts way do this, and then just hit record. And sometimes I do a couple takes, sometimes I do just one take, and all I'm working off is just sort of a basic outline of sort of these bite-sized things that I want students to be able to come away with from the video at the end. And then, obviously having some sort of musical example and also reinforcement at the piano throughout the video too. So that's kind of my process.
And so do you have a camera on your keyboard, above your keyboard as well?
Yeah, so I've done it different ways. I have a camera above my keyboard, but I also now have sort of a digital keyboard that's hooked up to my actual keyboard through MIDI, so it'll just capture that keyboard as well. So that's what I've really transitioned to in the last couple of years. But yeah, I used to have a literal, dangling Logitech webcam above the piano. So that made things a little awkward sometimes. If you're not doing an instructional video, imagine that. But other than that, yeah, I've been doing that digital keyboard for sure.
So the digital keyboard kind of from your computer screen is shown on there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And it lights up if you're playing. What's cool about it is it'll light up if you're playing like C major triad. Those notes will light up. So you're not seeing your physical hands, but you're seeing those particular notes light up on the keyboard. Yeah.
That's cool. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah. And the program I use for that, I think, is called Classroom Maestro. So take a look up on that if you're interested in the digital keyboard.
I remember when I first started recording the videos, during the lockdown and things, I would do exactly like you said. I would go back and I would scrutinize it and criticize myself, and I would say it's slightly too loud when I played that example. The Bruno Mars needs to be taken down. The Stevie Wonder one needs to be going up, and then about the third or fourth class period later, I was just like, ain't nobody got time for that kind of theory.
Sure. You made it longer than I did, Ben. I think I had like one day of being like, I'm going to do another take. And after that, I was like, never mind, doesn't matter. Unless I said something totally absurd in the middle, I was like,
exactly.
Here it goes, publish, put it in the
you just
module.
have to think about it like you're teaching, it's an instructional video. I think we get so far down the road of like, oh my gosh, the production quality has to be so high. It has to be this scripted, masterpiece. And it's just like, no, this is you talking to your students. And, at the end of the day, if you make some sort of joke, inside joke from class, they're probably going to love it. It's not going to be something that you're probably putting on YouTube and getting a million hits on. That's not the purpose of it. It's really to be, tailored instruction for your students. So I really try to have that mindset that we're not going for perfection here. This is not my, I'm not a YouTuber. This is not my full-time job, but I can use this as a really important pedagogical resource to increase, the amount of time we have in the classroom to do sort of hands-on activities. And really that's the end goal.
Now, you mentioned earlier how you kind of had used like a flip model type of structure for this when the students watch a video, and then that allows for more time in class to practice and things like that. Now, have you ever used some type of like assessment or quiz to make sure that the students actually watch the video? Because that's one thing I ran into the first time I started doing flipped classrooms, is that I'd make these amazing videos, and be so excited for them to watch them, and then the class period comes in and they're like, oh, we didn't watch them. Like, what? How did you not watch that?
I know. It's like, how are you not so pumped about this video? Like, I just spent 50 hours creating it. No, I'm kidding. Aren't you like, waiting for that notification to come up on your LMS system? Like, wow, Professor Thomas uploaded a new video.
I know. I mean, why am I still only at 3 views on YouTube? I mean, come on.
Yeah. No, I think sometimes you do need to, use quizzes, and that can be easily handled by having not a pop quiz, but every sort of having this habitual, like, okay, every time you come into the classroom, we're going to start out with this 5-minute quiz, and I'm going to test whether you know the materials or not. So I think that's a really good way to do it. You can also insert quizzes within videos. So within something like Panopto, you can put in sort of midway quizzes that sort of stop students from going forward until they complete it. So there's different things you can do. I'm also a big fan of metrics, so watching to see how far students went, how far they completed it. But I think we can also, from our standpoint as instructors, help students out here too. I think distributing a 30-minute lecture via video is not probably going to yield great results. Yeah. So thinking about how can, again, and this goes back to my sort of philosophy about making things sort of bite-sized, keeping things 10 minutes and under. I mean, think about these students, they're, scrolling on TikTok. How long are those videos? I mean, the max number of minutes on TikTok, I think, is now 10. They raise it to 10 minutes, but the majority of videos are very, very short, and they're just scrolling through them. So you have to think about their sort of attention span is not very long. So to sit and listen to a lecture about applied chords or augmented sixths for 30 minutes isn't going to do them any favors either. So I think we can kind of work at, not just think of like, sort of in a negative, like, oh, students, they're never watching our videos, but also how can we make them more engaging? How can we make them more digestible for our students? I think is important to think about as well.
No, absolutely. During the pandemic, a colleague of mine and I were talking about the videos, and they were saying the very same thing. I'm spending all this time and they're not watching them. And I said, well, my students are not all watching them, but I can see who's watching them, and some of them are watching them more than once,
Absolutely.
And he was like, how are you getting them to do that? And I said, well, how long are your videos? He said, well, like 45 minutes, like a class would be. And I was like, that's why they're not watching them.
Absolutely.
Mine are like 8 minutes long.
Yep.
They will watch it, and they might watch it more than once if it's 8 minutes long, but you need to like get it down to that absolute core of what they have to know.
Yeah, and I think you can do other things too. I think having
multiple ones, for example.
For sure. Yeah, having multiple videos I think is more friendly, but also too, like thinking about how you're going to present yourself. It's easier on the instructor to just do a screencast, but I very deliberately do not do screencasts. I do this combination screencast, and that's because they can see me. I can try to draw them in, using body language, using facial expressions, making funny faces, being silly sometimes. That can really draw them into that experience. Because ultimately, we want to connect with each other, and in your teaching presence is a big part of what happens in the classroom. And I think sometimes we forget that. We think, oh, I'm just the relayer of, instructional content. It's like, no, you're far more than that. So I think really realizing how powerful of a tool that can be, but also, bringing in, cultural references, bringing in, funny aspects of pop culture can also be something that keeps them engaged as well. So, but really carefully, I think, thinking about how you're making these videos, not only length, but also style and format can be really helpful.
Yeah, I think the physical presence is so valuable because we all have to watch those, training videos, for our universities where, we have a wastewater management video that we have to watch at my university. And yeah, I know, but it's, it's a slideshow. I know, really. I know.
Okay.
Don't eat lunch during that one.
Yeah.
do not skip it. But it's, listening to basically a PowerPoint presentation with a voiceover is not engaging and doesn't bring you in. And you do such a nice job, as you mentioned, with your facial expressions, the tone of your voice, and that brings students in. And so I'll have my students do pedagogical videos, and in the past I'd be like, well, you don't have to put your face on it. But I think, as I'm thinking about it today, I think it probably be good to make them do that because it does change the effectiveness of the video, I think, a lot, even though some students are going to be a little more hesitant or more nervous because, again, they have to practice more perhaps. They don't like to watch themselves, but the engagement level is so much higher, I think, with those types of videos.
Absolutely. Yeah, and one thing I forgot to mention is also I think the practice of handwriting also can draw students in as well. I think there's actually, I've seen research done that students retain information much longer actually when they see the instructor handwriting than if you're just sort of giving typed comments, for example. So I think also it gives them time to sort of track with you that you're saying, okay, let me write this down, this one of my tips to remember, or let me put in this note versus like, let me flash, a tonic expansion in front of you, you got it? So no, instead you're, okay, let me write out the soprano line. Okay, let me think through these choices. Oh, here's a bass line that might work. Oh, that didn't quite work. Let me play that. So they can kind of see you handwriting, working through the different options versus just seeing a product that you maybe thought a lot about and put a lot of time into crafting, but they maybe need to see like the behind the scenes steps. Getting to that point. So I think also using that handwriting and having that process be more transparent to the students of how you're getting to certain answers or how you're coming up with, these concepts can really help them retain and be engaged with the material too.
Yeah, these are all really good tips. I think anybody who listens to this is going to have a really good little tool set of like softwares, tips on how to make a good video, like what makes good engagement. But ultimately, administrators, we all have them. My administrators keep asking me, Graf, when are we going to put all those oral skills classes online? And I keep like kind of dragging my feet intentionally. I hope my administrators are not listening to this, but
I'm sure they're not.
I'm sure they're not. But what would be your response? Because you have like clearly this interest in online instruction that you've developed. You've really been able to deliver high quality classes and content. What happens when your dean says, Dr. Venturino, how about putting those oral skills 1 to 4 online? What do you say?
As a total, like just fully online courses, are you talking, or
fully online?
Fully online. Well, I feel like I embrace online education, so I'd probably say I'm up for the challenge.
You're so politically correct.
Skills, you had to pick oral skills too. It's so challenging to teach oral skills online. I think there's always going to be a place for face-to-face instruction. I would kind of reorient it and really think more about how can we use online education, or how can we embrace the online sphere in an increasingly digital world. And maybe the answer into that is not putting everything online all the time, but how can we more and more have digital tools or have hybrid scenarios or use the online classroom space. So while you can have, if you can have fully online courses, and I think those can be done successfully if there's a synchronous component. I think all online classes should have a synchronous component to be really high quality learning experiences. But I never think we're gonna, I would kind of push back maybe to that administrator and say, maybe we're not ready to have all instruction be fully online all the time. Maybe we can use that fully online instruction to reach a certain subset of students who maybe don't have access, to hybrid education or to face-to-face education. But yes, let's increase that digital component even within the classes we offer in a more traditional sense, because this is the world that our students are living in, that we're living in, and we can use these tools to our advantage. They're not some sort of flashy supplements. They can really be an integral part of trying to achieve our pedagogical goals and our outcomes. So I guess that's to answer your question. I would push back a little bit, but also, recognize there's a space for fully online courses, but not to discount still the traditional offerings that we have.
Wow, you're ready to be an administrator. I can tell. Based on that answer.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard, though. It's hard. And I think we're only going to see as we continue on, post-pandemic. I was interested to see, okay, are we going to completely say, we've had it with the online space, but I feel like online education is strong and it's here to stay. And I think COVID really pushed online education into the mainstream. It was sort of this peripheral sort of interest, like, oh, you're interested in that online stuff. Well, we do the real, work here in the face-to-face classroom. I don't think that's, I don't think that's the case now. And we're increasingly seeing a push from administrations, a push from, these sort of large, digital ed spaces to increase it and really think about what is the role. We're seeing more and more, online certificates being offered, more and more, Coursera courses, more and more, YouTube becoming a huge space for learning. And so I think that's only going to increase. So I think we do need to be extremely involved as part of universities, as part of, public schools, be part of that sort of community of online learners, whether that's in offering the fully online courses or whether that's bringing in those resources into our traditional classrooms and not being, afraid of bringing these things in.
Yeah, I totally agree. That really is a good answer. Got it. I'm going to remember that. Can you email that to me? I'm just kidding.
Okay, I'll send you the script. Yeah. Let me know how it goes. Let me know how it goes. Yeah. Let me know how it goes.
Ben runs into the dean in the hall and is like, "Hold on, I don't have my script."
Hold on, I can't talk about it right now. I got to run back to my office really fast.
Oh my goodness.
Be right back.
Oh my goodness.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
But I like that answer because, like, it's acknowledging the reality. We can't pretend like, we're irreplaceable, or that
Sure.
only classroom face-to-face instruction is valid or beneficial to students, and we have to be open and embracing all those things as much as we can in our different spheres.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's a spirit of, hopefully of all music theory teachers and oral skills teachers, is always thinking about how can I evolve, how can I continue to meet the needs of my students, and it goes to the heart of what a heart of good pedagogy is really having student-centered, a student-centered outlook, and so thinking about how that has different, ramifications, whether it's in your face-to-face classroom and how you interact with students on a personal basis, the types of activities you do, or whether it's in changing the mode of instruction and going more online. So I think it all comes back to that core, and if we can kind of think about how we can sort of, serve our students, then I think we'll be set no matter what sort of the world throws at us.
Mm-hmm. And we all have such different student bodies, and so that allows for multiple answers to that question.
Sure.
It's not like we all have to do this or that, because we have different types of students, different expectations on campus, off campus, different public, private universities. And so I think it's finding, what works for, your students that you have, and not feeling like, well, just because they're doing that, we have to do that. But what do your students need? Yeah, that's really invaluable.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Paul, because I think it's so easy to sort of jump on the bandwagon of like, oh my gosh, everyone's making instructional videos. I better not, get left behind, or I better do, this seems like a good thing to do. I should do it. I always encourage people, think about why you're doing this. Why are you making instructional videos? Why are you including video in your course design? Is there a real pedagogical reason, or are you just sort of seeing this technology and saying, oh, I should embrace it? So I think really coming back to, thinking really carefully about what we're doing and how we're using all these abundant resources that we have to really, no matter which sort of sphere we're in, to help our students. So I'm glad you said that.
So you have, I believe you've been at Yale since 2022, is that right?
Yes, just finished my first year, getting ready to embark on the second.
That is exciting. So,
yes.
We have, graduate students that listen to the podcast, and that's always one scary time, is to go from, the graduate student, the job search and all those things, and then, hopefully landing that full-time job. So, can you talk to us a little bit about, your first year, teaching, and maybe some, encouragement for those who might be looking at that in their near future?
Absolutely. Well, it was an absolute whirlwind for me. I think probably everyone can attest that their first year of full-time teaching goes by very quickly, and you're like, wait, that happened? But it also at the same time very, very fulfilling. So yeah, especially for me, I finished my dissertation last summer and officially graduated in August, and then started a couple days later at Yale. So it was really diving in head first. So I think as far as kind of 3 lessons that I take away from my first year is, first of all, being very flexible and being teachable and being a learner. Just because you're not a student anymore, and everyone says, don't act like a student, which I think is great advice on the job market. You need to be professional and sort of have this mindset of, I'm joining, I'm a colleague, but having a teachable spirit is, I think, really important. And continuing to learn during that first year. You're not going to have everything together. I can tell you that right now. And you need to continue to get to know your students, as I was just saying before, get to really know the school culture, get to know your colleagues, and start to really build a community there, and really a support network. I think those are really important. And not being afraid to ask for help. Really try to get some feedback on your teaching. Don't just think, I just went through this process, I just had so many people evaluating. We can always be learning, and we can always be improving. Get some peers in your classroom watching your teaching, get feedback from your students, and just continue to have this sort of growth mindset and be ready to make adjustments. The second thing I would say would be to really early on try to establish some healthy habits and put up some boundaries, healthy boundaries, and establish routines and schedules for yourself. I find this to be really important. I love teaching. Teaching is wonderful, but it also can consume your life. I think we all are really dedicated teachers here, and we always want to go into the classroom 100% prepared. And we always need to know our stuff. I mean, that's, without saying, but you can also really over-prepare, I think, for classes and spend all of your time just completely devoted to teaching, especially if you have any research component to your job, like I do, then you're going to need to learn to have a little bit of balance. And even just in general for, sort of a more healthy work-life balance, you need to make sure you have that, especially in your first year. It's sometimes hard to attain. So having some sort of schedule. So for me, it's, I teach on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So I try to keep all of my teaching activity, whether that's course prep or, physically being in the classroom, meeting with my teaching assistants, to Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I really try to focus on teaching those days. And then on Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturdays, I'm very much focused on research and writing. So I'm trying, if I have a crisis come up, yeah, of course, I'm jumping in to deal with that, but really trying to make sure I have dedicated time for these other activities that are also an important part of my job. So whatever your schedule or whatever your job responsibilities look like, just making sure, I think, having healthy schedules and healthy habits for yourself is really important. And then lastly, I think being forgiving of yourself. You're not always going to follow that schedule. I deviated from it, for sure. And you're not always going to be perfect in the classroom. You're going to, as I said before, kind of keep growing. So embrace those opportunities where maybe things could have gone better, or, as sort of an opportunity for growth, and don't really beat yourself up over it, and really look to how can I, as I said before, build that support system, get good feedback, and continue growing during that first year. So those are just some things off the top of my head that come to mind. But there's so many lessons. Every day is full of them, especially on your first year on the job.
Those
People
are
ask me to be on these
fantastic.
podcasts and stuff all the time.
Yeah, I wish I had learned that much my first year. I'm in year 11. I'm still working on all of those things. It's hard.
Absolutely.
It takes a long time, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's just life stuff. It's and figuring out how to balance all these different aspects of our life, and for every person, it's going to be different. But I think, first and foremost, being easy on yourself, but still being committed to excellence, and being disciplined. But having that balance is key.
So before we let you go, we always like to ask our guests some rapid fire questions. All right, So these are just off the cuff. And I realized this after the fact that, so Jenn and Ben, when we interviewed Sean.
Yeah, we didn't do it.
Oh,
So
get him back.
I know, we have to get him back for another episode. So we cannot miss this opportunity. So these are going to be just short, off the cuff, hot takes on whatever questions that we come up with. So we got 3.
Okay.
Jenn or Ben, do you have your question?
I'm ready.
Okay.
So of the AP, if you got to choose a question to be the rater on, because you spend the whole week on the same question usually.
Yep.
So if you got to choose, would it be, FR 1 through 7 or sight singing 1 or 2? What would it be? What would be your choice for grading the AP exam?
Gosh. Oh, shout out to FR7. I mean, I had the best. Honestly, I'm kind of biased because I've only been once, and I was in FR7 this year, and I just had the
in
most
year 1. Whoa.
I was. They put me in FR7, and so I was. I had the most fantastic table partner. So I'm so grateful to Emily for keeping me sane and helping me along throughout that first reading. But I think FR7 is just, there's so many nuances to grading that question, and so you really have to, the rubric, is like, and all the supplemental material, it's many pages, so really diving into that and sort of getting into the mind of how this question is devised and how it works and how it's graded is really special. And I love also, we play the best examples, really high, 9s. We'll play them on the piano. Joe Kraus was playing them this year, and it's just such an exciting moment to see how much these students, as you said earlier, Jenn, have accomplished, throughout this year of study. And to hear that, we're all sitting in this freezing air-conditioned room and be able to to be warmed by the warmed by the beautiful sounds of a nice nice secondary dominant within a FR7 is good. So
it's true. If you don't know, FR7 is they write a baseline and Roman numerals.
Yep.
It's like the melody harmonization question. And most of the questions take maybe an hour or 2 to train on, and then you're grading. And FR7 has at times taken more than a day to train
it took a day and a half. Yeah,
because there's so many possibilities as to what could be correct from the students for each question. And then of course you get to the end of it and you have to grade all the alternates. So you're then training on this whole other version with all these other possibilities. But It is really
Sure.
fun. And I don't know why, because when I was grading, I was in Cincinnati and you would be in Kansas City, right?
Kansas City, yep.
Yeah, and no matter where you are, it's like it's freezing cold. They gave us fleece blankets as a present one year, and we were all wrapped in them for the whole time.
I heard about those fleece blankets. I was jealous the whole time. I was like, oh, I missed the fleece blanket here.
I still have it.
But good. Oh, yeah, but I was there with my hoodie. I was, I was ready to go, but yeah, it was pretty cold, but I guess that keeps us alert. It's,
I guess so, yeah.
And we need something to other than the candy to help keep us going.
Yeah.
So.
All right, Ben, what do you have?
I was going to say, if you could only teach one example, what would it be? Like if it was your last lesson and you said, you know what, I'm going to teach whatever piece X, what is it?
Wow, that is challenging. I think a piece I really, really enjoy teaching, and I'm biased because I'm a wind player, is the Ligeti's Six Bagatelles for wind quintet. Is a piece I've really, really enjoyed teaching and have had the opportunity to teach it in different contexts, whether it's fundamentals or in graduate level courses, and it has such legs. It has so much to offer. Between the first movement. Being this, alternation between, major and minor triads, and having students even in, sort of beginning theory sort of go through and look for these different collections and see sort of how Ligeti uses contrast and such limited pitch materials to create something really, really exciting. So that's fun, but then also kind of thinking on the larger scale, how you take a piece. So this wind quintet is from his larger work for piano, the Musica Ricercata, and how he sort of adapted it for wind. So that's a fun thing to talk about with my wind players, and then sort of how he has this process of adding pitch classes as he goes through the movements and sort of linking that to serial thought, and there's so many extra musical things to talk about. So I just feel like that's a piece I've had a lot of fun with over the last couple of years, and yeah, it's just exciting to teach. So that would be the one that comes to mind for me. We always need more wind music in the music theory classroom.
Totally.
Too much piano, too much. I think too much string
too
quartet.
many chorales.
Too many chorales. Yeah, I was going to say back to the chorales. Yeah, too many chorales. So that's one of my goals in life as well, is to bring more wind music, more wind chamber music, more brass music into the music theory classroom. So yeah, that would be my answer.
I love it. I'm a wind player as well. So
Oh,
there you
great!
go.
What do you play?
Trumpet. Trumpet's my main.
Yes. Go trumpet. Love it.
Played for Hershey up in Pennsylvania. Those that have
Fantastic.
been there. That was my job.
Wonderful.
Marching around. The place that smells like chocolate. It does smell like chocolate.
It does smell like
actually.
chocolate. It's
It does.
such a happy
and
place.
So my question is, of all of the videos that you have made, which one do you think is your best one?
Oh my goodness.
I know it's like your children.
Oh wow. I think I try to forget them after. No kidding. It's like, oh, another one done. Check it off the list. Oh gosh. I don't know if there's a favorite. I mean, I really find joy in even the simplest of videos. And the most mundane topics, I think, are sometimes the most challenging and the most exciting to have a video. And it's like, how can I take this very, on its face, very boring, topic and make it the most interesting, the most musical for my students. So those, I think, are the ones I'm most proud of, whereas you can teach it in a very sort of straightforward way, but it's something that's more engaging. One of my favorites is on the deceptive cadence / resolution. That's a fun one. So that's one of the ones that sticks out in my mind, or any sort of analytical video as well, just kind of leading students through the process of analysis, and so they can kind of see the inner workings of a music theorist analyzing something and leading them through the different elements and thinking about different parameters like rhythm or pitch or so I think all of those sorts of things are exciting. So it's hard for me to just pick one, but that's a good question. I'll have to go back and watch some more. But
have your students review them and rate them,
no.
perhaps.
Oh dear, that sounds scary. No, no, that's great. That's great. I'll follow up with a ranking list of ranked videos for you.
That's great. So before we leave, Stephanie, please let our listeners know maybe how they can find you if you want to be found on the internet, and then a little bit maybe what you've got currently working as far as teaching or research.
Absolutely. So, yeah, COVID really pushed me off social media, so I'm no longer on social media, so you can't find me there, but you can find me if you see my email. It's on the Yale School of Music website. If you just type in Stephanie Venturino, Yale School of Music, you'll be able to email me right there. It's just stephanie.venturino@yale.edu is my email. And I'm always happy to chat via email or on Zoom, always excited to hear what people are up to, and their ideas are extremely inspiring to me. As far as projects that are going on, I'm currently teaching a new seminar this fall on French music, which is my research specialty. So I'm excited to dive in to that with my students. And I'm also teaching a graduate review course. So students who don't do very well on the placement exam, I get to have them all for a year. So that's very fun to lead them through, really discovering maybe holes in their knowledge. And these are also really very adept graduate level performers here at the School of Music. But a lot of them, maybe haven't thought about how music theory and performance could interact. So going way back to the beginning of the podcast and the conversation, it's like, that's back to my, sort of life goal as a high schooler, and getting to live that out every day in the classroom and help other people discover these connections is something that's really exciting. And on the research front, I have several articles going, and just as plugging along there and looking at continuations of my dissertation, which focused on French ideas of resonance between 1900 and 1960. So working on some articles from that dissertation, and moving forward into my pedagogical research is focusing on video feedback. So looking at feedback using this combination screencast that I was just talking about, and how that looks, how we can sort of combine that with thinking about the revised Bloom's taxonomy and different practices for creating video feedback in the music theory and oral skills context. So so it's kind of where I am right now, and it's a lot of work, but a lot of rewarding work at the same time.
Yeah, that's great. You had me at Bloom's, so.
I love it. I'll have to remember that one for future reference.
You just made it to the end of another episode of Note Doctors, the music theory and pedagogy podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and review the podcast, and you can always reach us at notedoctorspodcast@gmail.com with comments, questions, or show ideas. Thanks for listening.